Today, we're going to be talking about a couple different items that I just need to get through, and I've been shooting quite a bit on. One of them is a $800 overpriced mess, and the other is a Canik. Over the last couple months, I put about 4,000 rounds on the Canik Rival S Darkside, and a little bit less than that on the RMR HD, as it was not on this the entire time. I have shot 3 or 4 competitions with it at this point, but most of the time it was also on one of my carry guns instead, because it's not really good for competition, as it's not really designed for that. But getting into basics and full disclosure on the Trijicon RMR HD and the Canik Rival S is that I have no relationship with either company. I spent my own money on the Rival S, and I had a very kind viewer loan me the RMR HD, which I've had for several months now, and I need to actually get back to the original owner, and so I need to get this video out there. I want to be extremely concise on the Trijicon RMR HD. MSRP is about $800. Street price is $650 to $700, which is brutally overpriced. The real difference between this and an RMR Type 2 is that the window is slightly taller and pushed forward so that we could get a top-loading 2032, and we could get a forward-facing light sensor that regulates your dot brightness. Now, it has a couple different auto modes. You can turn them off. I would recommend that, as it never really selects the correct one, and I'm not a fan of really any auto modes out there. Battery life, totally fine. Don't really care about that. Forged aluminum housing, all good there. Window size is basically the exact same as the regular RMR Type 2. It is just up and out of the way a little bit more, so some people might like that. However, for me, the standard RMR window was always quite small compared to the competition. So unless you're looking for the most ultra-durable, battle-tested optic out there, I pretty much avoid RMRs like the plague. And since I'm not hot-dropping into Fallujah anytime soon, the extra durability on the RMR HD isn't really a tangible bonus compared to other optics that actually do what I want them to do a little bit better. As far as actual downsides and complaints, the glass is very blue. Not that that's a big deal, it's kind of a Trijicon standard. The dot brightness adjustments are incredibly coarse, and the dot size is allegedly 3.25 MOA, though I don't believe that's accurate, or maybe it's only accurate for these lower brightness settings, because as soon as you get up to visible, it blooms out incredibly fast. So whenever I'm shooting this at competition or just dry firing, I never really have a setting that I actually like. There is usually a jump between too dim and blooming out. So if I like to fine tune it, which again is more of just a preference thing than like it actually matters all that much, but as a preference thing, if I'm dropping big bucks on the optic, I would like it to at least have settings that I am comfortable using in any given scenario, instead of just being annoyed that I don't have the right setting that I would like. Is it a bad optic? No, but it sacrifices a lot to achieve a higher durability, and it comes with a very hefty price tag, and for me it poses no tangible benefits. So as soon as this video is over, I'm actually taking it off so I can actually get to practicing and dry firing with the actual optic that I want to run sectionals on Saturday with. Getting to the Canik, and the title of this video, 4,000 rounds is not enough. Again, that is the round count basically that I'm currently at until tomorrow, where it'll be about 4,500 rounds. But about 4,000 rounds through the Canik Rival S Darkside so far. Now, I do want to say that the first 3,000 rounds were mostly stock. As soon as I got it, I had a viewer of the channel reach out to me and ask if I wanted to take the lock grips from him. So these are actually brass lock grips on the steel Rival S frame, bringing the total weight as you see it with the RMR HD and TLR1 clone up to 55 ounces roughly, so it is teetering on the edge of what you can get away with in carry optics for USPSA. Over the last 3,000 rounds, it was mostly stock, didn't touch any internals, just again the brass grips on the outside that a kind viewer of the channel gave me. A couple little nuanced issues that have arisen through many hundreds of hours of dry fire and live fire is that the brass grips do not quite meld perfectly with the steel frame, so I have a very odd line of calluses on my right hand from my middle finger all the way down to my pinky, where my right hand crushes them against the brass grips, and they have a very sharp edge right here, and so I have a very interesting wear pattern on my hand. Other than that, the grip do be gripping, and it is full of skin and blood at this point. Now, the rest of the frame, I don't really have too many complaints about, other than the magwell itself. For some inexplicable reason, they flared the magwell on it nicely, but they left a very, very sharp edge in the back where 99% of my hangups would be on this little edge in the back. So I took an angle grinder to it and I said, "No thank you, sir," and I removed it. Part of that is probably due to the fact that it's designed to be used with the external magwell that ships with the Rival S. However, if I put that on in USPSA, that will bump me up to limited optics, which is full of the sweatiest retards known to man, and I mean that in a loving way. At the 3,000 round mark, I did decide to make a couple very inexpensive upgrades. One of them is the trigger or reset spring. It is simply, I think from Rune Tactical, they sell these for like 18 bucks. They are very, very inexpensive. Essentially, it's just a larger spring, so you have less resistance to overcome on the trigger reset. So it drops your pull weight from about 3.5 pounds to about 2.5 pounds. When I'm actually shooting it, I don't notice a difference, but it was an $18 upgrade, and I haven't had any issues with it yet over the last 1,000 rounds or so. The other upgrade that I did that was, or I should say quote-unquote upgrade, that I did that's a little bit more expensive is a brass guide rod and a 14-pound recoil spring, which is on the absolute bleeding edge of what is actually reliable with this thing. So for instance, with the 14-pound recoil spring, it will not actually fight gravity to go back into battery. So if we pull the trigger, you can kind of see it actually pull itself back into battery. So with that, it is very much on the bleeding edge of reliability. I have had one real hiccup, but I'm not sure if it's just because I didn't insert the magazine all the way, so it didn't feed around and kind of got jammed up for a second. So I am a little bit disconcerted with the 14-pound recoil spring. And I should mention that reliability was perfect for the first 3,000 rounds. And I have had one issue with the 14-pound recoil spring, which is why I do keep it very wet. Now, in that pack, it also came with a 15-pound recoil spring. So I think the 15-pound recoil spring might be a better blend of performance and reliability. And of course, I also have the stock one in there as well, if I ever needed to. Because again, that 14-pound recoil spring, which is nice and it feels pretty similar to stock, but you can tell it's a little bit less snappy. It feels nice, but again, that bleeding edge reliability, if it wasn't a gamer gun, I would never do that. And again, the trigger is quite literally 2.5, 3 pounds, something like that. It feels very nice, light, crisp. But again, when you're actually shooting at speed, you don't really notice it that much. Now, briefly talking about magazines, the standard 20-round magazines are made by Canik, and they are fantastic, so you can get 20+1 in there. I did buy some +5 extensions from Strike Industry. They claim that they are USPSA legal for the 141.25 millimeter division, whatever it happens to be for carry optics. However, they are certainly not USPSA legal, so I've actually been running these in some matches. My bad. Now, these do actually work perfectly fine. I've never had an issue with one, and they do give you 23+1 round capacity. However, at this point, it no longer locks the slide back on an empty magazine, which is quite funny, because of course the regular 20 rounds will as well. I really just need to go out and buy real base pads rather than running the Strike Industries plastic fantastic, although some would say that Strike Industries owners and Canik owners probably go hand in hand. Now, if we talk about actual value on the gun, if we include the price of the brass guide rod, recoil spring, trigger reset spring, and the brass grips, we're probably at about $1,000. Now, I don't think that those are necessary upgrades whatsoever. In fact, they're more likely side grades than true upgrades. But in terms of value for a heavyweight carry optics gun, kind of a carry optics cheater gun, if you will, with one of the better triggers out there, it's pretty hard to beat for the money. I want to say that the PDP steels are $1,300 to $1,500. The new 320 is around the same price, if not more, plus factoring in hospital bills, very expensive. So as a steel-framed carry optics gun, it's quote-unquote high value. However, I still don't really trust the thing. Getting back to the title of the video, 4,000 rounds is not enough. Just the fact that I've had one malfunction, really, in the last 4,000 rounds is not much of a recommendation. And there are still little things that I dislike about it. You know, I had to machine the grip myself to actually accept magazines, which is quite fun. There's a few little things that I dislike about it and a few disconcerting things as well. There's a really odd wear pattern on either side of the barrel where you can tell that they really smack together during the cycling of the gun, and it's removed material from both sides of the barrel. So I think that over time they're kind of fitting themselves together rather than being perfectly fitted from the factory, but that is kind of the Canik reputation there. So 4,000 rounds on something like this, even though I've had good luck with mine, and I do mean luck, is certainly not enough for me to recommend it to somebody else for anything short of a meme application like what this is. And I know that Canik had big issues with their original Rival S's, all sorts of little problems that they've hopefully worked out with the newer models. So far, so good. But just because I've put a lot of rounds on it and I'm having a good time with it, won some local comps with it, it's not really that impressive and not something that I would go out and say, oh, you gotta buy this right now, guys. It's so amazing. It's such a great gun. When I go from shooting this to shooting my Glock 17, the 17 is a little bit more snappy and a little bit more difficult to get it to do what I want, where this is, I think, at my personal skill level, a little bit easier to shoot. Not so much that it really makes a difference in most applications. Really, it's going to come down to your personal level of training, and that's kind of the boring response because that's just the fact of the matter. Now, if I did my math right, by the end of the year, September, October timeframe, I should have roughly 10,000 rounds or more on this specific handgun, and so we'll see how it holds up. As of right now, I think I probably need to switch back to the 15-pound recoil spring rather than the 14, because it's already in the first 1,000 rounds again, basically in the bleeding edge of reliability. So if that spring starts to set at all, well, then we're going to be in some big trouble, and I'd like that not to happen in the middle of a match. So I'll probably go ahead and just swap out to the 15-pound recoil spring and call that good. Funnily enough, they do offer some even lighter recoil springs, but then you have to mess with the striker spring to get the gun to actually cycle. And so far, I've had perfect ejection or perfect ignition of primer, so I am not going to touch that whatsoever. I'd like to just keep that in place and do as few modifications as possible. Again, in reality, it's 2 springs that I've switched out, and that's basically it. The extra weight components make the gun recoil slightly different, maybe a little bit slower, but it's not necessarily better, because I think a 42-ounce handgun is heavy enough. I don't really see any benefit from adding an extra 10 ounces on top of an already heavy gun. But with all that out of the way, gentlemen, let me know what you think of the Trijicon RMR HD and the Canik Rival S Darkside. And with all that out of the way, gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. God bless.
Are you trying to have